So what if I told you that the decisions you make today about just a few $100s a month could be the exact difference between your kid graduating college, dragging like a heavy set of financial chains, or stepping into adulthood with a $143,000 head start?
I mean, it sounds almost too good to be true, right? But the math is real.
It really is. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Today we are entirely dismantling the cultural lie that is the modern student loan.
Yeah, we're really digging into a concrete biblical approach to securing your child's debt-free future.
Because right now, the numbers surrounding student debt, they aren't just a macroeconomic problem. This is a massive crisis. We have 43 million borrowers carrying roughly $1.65 trillion in student loan debt.
Right. And to put that $1.65 trillion into perspective, that is actually more than the GDP of many developed nations.
Wow.
And it's carried largely by young people who haven't even, hit their peak earning years yet.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this isn't just an economic crisis, is it? It goes much deeper.
Oh, absolutely. When you look at the historical Christian counsel on this, specifically the writings of Ellen G. White, she framed debt in just incredibly stark terms.
Right. She didn't just call it a bad investment.
No, she called it a spiritual snare. She warned that when someone steps into debt, they have effectively stepped into one of Satan's nets set for souls.
A snare. Man, that is a heavy phrase. It really shifts the entire conversation from just like mere financial planning to active spiritual warfare.
It really does. It forces you to look at the underlying mechanism of debt. She was incredibly clear about the danger of using money before it's actually earned. She called it a trap.
Which is exactly what a student loan is.
Exactly. Borrowing tens of thousands of dollars before a young person has even entered the workforce, before they've earned a real paycheck or learned how to manage a family budget. It's the exact embodiment of that trap.
You're spending your future labor before you've even secured a job. And yet, as a society, we've completely normalized it.
Oh, it's treated as a rite of passage.
Right. You graduate high school, you sign a piece of paper you barely understand, and you take on mortgage levels of debt for a degree.
It's terrifying when you really think about it.
But for you listening, if you're striving for responsible household planning, if you want your family's finances to reflect your Christian values, like self-reliance, giving generously to missions, honoring the Sabbath without the crushing anxiety of debt payments, you have to actively reject that cultural lie.
Yeah, the goal is to hand our kids a bright future, not a paralyzing burden. And parents' intentions are always good. They want to provide.
Of course.
But keeping your kids out of debt requires more than just good intentions. It requires a very specific order of financial operations. Because doing the right things in the wrong order can cause an absolute disaster for a family.
Which brings us to the framework for the household. Before we can build this debt-free future for our children, we really have to look at the overall financial picture of the home. Financial planners often use a framework of sequential steps. And today we're focusing on 3 specific milestones. Baby steps 4, 5, and 6.
That's investing 15% of your household income for retirement, saving for your children's college education, and putting any extra money toward paying off your home early.
Now, the crucial point here is that once you have a fully funded emergency fund, these 3 steps happen simultaneously. But the order of priority within that simultaneous action matters deeply.
It really does. Let's break down that priority. The absolute first priority among those 3 is the 15% into retirement.
Right.
And why exactly 15%? Because mathematically, if you put in 15% of your gross income, compound interest will build a nest egg large enough to replace your income in your later years. But, and this is key, it leaves enough margin in your current monthly budget to actually tackle the next 2 goals.
The college fund and the mortgage. Let's pause on that because I want to voice the tension that a lot of Christian parents feel right here. Doesn't prioritizing your own retirement account over your teenager's college fund feel a bit selfish?
I hear that all the time.
Right. Because it feels counterintuitive to a life of Christian sacrifice. If I am a parent, my instinct is to sacrifice everything for my kids.
What's fascinating here is how this plays out over decades. Think of the Dave Ramsey analogy, the classic airplane safety briefing. You have to put your own oxygen mask on before assisting a child.
Because if you pass out from lack of oxygen, you're entirely useless to the person next to you.
Precisely. So how does that translate to the household budget? Look at the certainties of life. You will definitely want and physically need to retire one day. Your body will age, your working years will end.
That is a certainty.
Right. But your child, They may or may not choose to go to college. They might start a trade or go straight into ministry. By securing your own future first, you ensure that you never become a financial burden to your children in your old age.
Wow. Yeah. Imagine the alternative. You pause your retirement to pay for their college.
And 30 years later, you have no money. And now your adult child has to drain their own family's resources.
Or they have to stop giving their tithe to their local church just to pay for your basic care.
Exactly. You secure your oxygen mask, and then you help launch their future.
You're protecting them from future liabilities. And to you listeners who might still be wrestling with the idea of, accumulating large amounts of money in retirement and college accounts, let's bring in a really reassuring perspective.
Yeah, aggressively saving is not a lack of faith.
No, it doesn't mean you don't trust God to provide. Ellen White actually addressed this directly. She reminded us that the desire to accumulate wealth is an original affection implanted by our Heavenly Father for noble ends.
It all comes down to the purpose of the wealth. Preparing a child to enter adulthood debt-free so they can freely serve God, giving faithfully to the church, supporting local missions, these are among the noblest of ends.
Right. Managing resources wisely so your family can thrive and give generously, that is the very definition of faithful stewardship.
Absolutely.
But keeping the oxygen mask on doesn't mean you just, stuff cash under the mattress for your kid's future.
Oh, no. Inflation will eat it alive over 18 years.
Right. You have to shelter from taxes, which forces us to look at the actual tools the government provides. So let's get into the financial vehicles available in the arsenal.
There are a few traditional routes that have been around for a while. First is the ESA, the Educational Savings Account. This allows you to invest up to $2,000 per year per child.
And the mechanism that makes the ESA so powerful is tax-free growth.
Exactly. You put after-tax money in, it grows through investments, and when you pull it out for qualified education expenses, the IRS cannot touch the growth.
And that isn't just for college. It includes K-12 tuition, tutoring, books.
Which is a massive benefit for families who are prioritizing Christian education early on and need to pay, say, academy tuition.
Yeah, that's huge. And then there is the 529 savings plan. This works similarly to the ESA regarding tax-free growth, but it doesn't have that strict $2,000 annual contribution limit.
Right. You can put much more into a 529. But there is a major caveat with 529s. You have to avoid the prepaid 529 plans.
Why are those so dangerous?
Because of how they restrict you. A prepaid plan essentially lets you lock in today's tuition rates at specific, usually in-state public universities.
But what if your kid decides they want to go to an out-of-state Christian college?
Or what if they want to pursue a trade? That money is effectively trapped or subjected to really heavy penalties. You always want to stick to the standard investment 529 so the money grows with the market and stays flexible.
Okay, now we really have to talk about the new legislative option that fundamentally shifts this whole landscape. In July 2025, legislation was passed called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or OBBA.
Right, the OBBA, which created what are colloquially being called Trump accounts. And look, we need to be very clear here for the listener.
Yes, absolutely. Mandatory impartiality note right here. We are maintaining strict political neutrality.
Exactly. Regardless of where anyone sits on the political aisle, we are not taking sides or endorsing the legislation. We are strictly impartially reporting the facts and the math of these new accounts as detailed in our source material.
Right, because if they are legally available, families need to know exactly how they work and how to utilize them for stewardship.
Precisely. We're just looking at the mechanics.
So these are tax-advantaged long-term savings and investment accounts specifically for children under 18. Think of them as a hybrid between a traditional IRA and a 529 plan. You contribute up to $5,000 per year into these accounts.
And the most groundbreaking detail here is that no earned income is required to make those contributions.
Wait, really? Because usually the IRS says a kid needs a verifiable W-2 job, like working at a grocery store, to put money into a retirement-style account.
Right. They normally have to report earned income, but not with these new accounts under OBBA. Anyone can contribute. Parents, guardians, relatives.
So grandma and grandpa can skip buying the flashy plastic toys that break in a week and just drop money straight into this account for birthday.
Exactly. There is also a pilot program attached to this legislation that families really need to be aware of.
Oh, yeah, the seed money.
Right. If a child is a U.S. citizen born between January 1st, 2025 and December 31st, 2028, they are eligible for a one-time $1,000 deposit straight from the federal government.
Wow. And to get this started, contributions can begin after July 4, 2026, and the accounts are opened by filing IRS Form 4547.
And the flexibility of Form 4547 is what makes it unprecedented. Unlike a 529 plan or a Coverdell ESA, these new accounts do not require the funds to be used for education.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I like to think of this as a financial time capsule. If your kid decides they want to skip college and start a plumbing business or go straight into the mission field overseas, the money isn't trapped.
Right, it isn't heavily penalized for non-educational use. When the child turns 18, the account simply converts into a traditional IRA.
Let's run the mathematical implications of this because they are astounding.
Let's do it. Let's look at how compound interest actually functions here. Compound interest isn't just a piggy bank you drop coins into. It's a snowball rolling down a hill.
Okay, I like that visual.
That initial $1,000 government seed is the core of the snowball. If a family contributes the maximum $5,000 annually for 17 years, packing more snow onto it, and we assume a moderate 6% growth rate in the market.
The interest begins earning its own interest.
Exactly. By the time that child turns 18, the snow it has picked up along the way makes that account worth roughly $143,000.
$143,000 at age 18. I mean, that completely alters the trajectory of a young person's life.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a massive vehicle for long-term wealth building.
But as exciting as that math is, handing an 18-year-old a massive pile of money or a fully paid education without any character development or work ethic attached to it, that's a recipe for absolute disaster.
Oh, without a doubt. There has to be a partnership here. The parents are doing their part with baby step 5. But what is the student's responsibility? It's a partnership, not a blank check.
The student has to have skin in the game.
Right. And the first part of the student's responsibility is cutting costs and being realistic. One of the biggest financial traps students fall into is choosing a school they simply cannot afford, often just for the vanity of an Ivy League name.
The prestige trap.
Yeah.
The reality is a student has a far better shot at a successful, faithful life entering adulthood debt-free from a state or local community college than carrying an expensive diploma with years of crippling payments attached to it.
Exactly. An employer rarely cares where you got your degree. They care about your character and your competence.
So how does the student actually help cut those costs practically?
Well, during high school, applying for scholarships shouldn't just be an afterthought. The student should treat it like a part-time job. Let's look at the mechanism of that. If a student spends 2 hours writing an essay for a $500 local grant from a Rotary Club and they win it, they just effectively earn $250 an hour.
That's incredible when you frame it like that. They also need to fill out the FSA early. That's the free application for federal student aid, which unlocks federal grants money you don't have to pay back.
Yes. And then there's the academic hustle, taking AP classes and really exploring dual enrollment programs.
Dual enrollment is like one of the best kept secrets in education. You are literally sitting in a high school classroom or taking a local community college course, paying a fraction of the cost, and earning real college credits that transfer directly to a 4-year university.
You bypass the inflated university pricing model entirely and shave off entire semesters of tuition.
And room and board, which is huge.
Speaking of room and board, we cannot overlook one of the most powerful cost-cutting measures, living at home and commuting. Room and board are often just as expensive, if not more so, than the tuition itself.
Plus, from a family values perspective, living at home keeps the student grounded. They are still part of the family ecosystem.
Exactly. They are there for Sabbath meals, they're plugged into their local home church, they are participating in family budgeting and meal planning at home.
It keeps them tethered to healthy living and responsible stewardship while they navigate those transitional college years, rather than just being thrown into the chaos of dorm life.
It integrates their education into their daily faith practice, but I want to explore the philosophical side of the student working, because this goes deeper than just paying bills. This raises an important question regarding character development.
I have a cultural observation about this, actually. Modern parenting often leans toward wanting to give our kids a completely free ride. We don't want them to stress. We want them to focus entirely on their studies.
Right, we think we're doing them a favor by removing all financial friction.
But removing that friction actually robs them of character formation. The source argues that struggle and part-time work actually build extraordinary character.
It connects directly to our values of industry, self-reliance, and hard work. Ellen White took this concept a step further and actually challenged the educators themselves on this issue.
What does she say?
She essentially said that if a student studies for years without seeking to earn their own way, the school has failed in half its mission.
Man, that is a massive indictment of how we view modern schooling. Half their work is a failure if the student isn't learning the value of a dollar earned.
Because helping pay for their education through part-time work isn't a distraction from their studies. It is a foundational pillar of their character. Young people must learn the value of money by earning it themselves.
When a student has to work a shift to pay for a textbook, they treat that textbook differently.
Exactly. They treat their classes differently. They learn the weight of money.
So it's a true partnership. The parents are faithfully working the financial steps, setting their own retirement priorities straight, utilizing tax advantage tools like the ESA, the 529, or these new IRS Form 4547 accounts.
And the student is working diligently, cutting costs, earning credits early, and working part-time.
So what does this all mean? When we bring all these steps together, what is the ultimate finish line?
The finish line is the freedom to serve. When a young adult graduates without those heavy, suffocating chains of student loan payment, their world looks entirely different than their peers.
They have options instead of obligations.
Yeah.
Think about the mechanics of those obligations for a second. If you owe $1,000 a month in student loans, you have to take the highest paying corporate job you can find, regardless of whether it aligns with your calling or your Christian values.
Right. You are a slave to the lender, just as Proverbs says. You can't afford to take a risk.
But if you are debt-free, you are free to accept a call to ministry, even if the starting salary is incredibly modest.
You are free to enter the mission field overseas because you don't have a lender demanding a monthly check.
You are free to start a family without the immense marriage-straining financial stress that usually accompanies graduation day. You can prioritize Sabbath observance and healthy, balanced living because you weren't forced to work 80-hour weeks just to keep your head above water.
By faithfully working baby steps 4, 5, and 6 together, you are doing so much more than just building a nice nest egg. You are actively breaking generational curses of debt.
You are modeling authentic, practical, biblical stewardship for your children.
You are giving them the ultimate head start to live generously for the kingdom of God. It's a complete paradigm shift, from seeing college as an inevitable trap of debt to seeing it as an opportunity for disciplined, faithful family teamwork.
It really is. And it leaves us with something profound to consider. We spend so much time worrying about how debt affects the individual. But I want you, the listener, to mull over this final provocative thought. If an entire generation of young adults enters the world completely debt-free, perhaps even armed with a fully funded IRA instead of a loan payment, how does that fundamentally change their willingness to take risks for God's kingdom?
Think about how that alters the modern labor market. If millions of young Christians no longer need to chase massive corporate salaries just to pay off lenders.
Imagine the sheer volume of new ministries, local church plants, and charitable innovations that could be pioneered in their 20s.
All because their first thought isn't financial survival, but service. It would completely redefine the modern workforce and the impact of the church.
It really would. Well, that's all the time we have. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep planning, keep communicating with your kids, and we'll see you next time.